board workshop of the Board of Trustees of the McAllen Independent School District will be held Monday, April the 3rd, 2023, beginning at 5:30 p.m. here at the library of McAllen High School, 2021 La Vista, McAllen, 78501. Items listed on this agenda may be taken in an order other than as shown as on the agenda. And at this meeting, there may be discussion by the board on the items and subject listed below as followed. Item number 1, call the meeting to order. Item number 2, public comments. We do not have public comments for our board workshop, so we'll jump into item number 3, discussion of the 2023-2024 budget, the legislative update, and human resource update. Dr. Gonzalez.
Yes, sir, Mr. President. TEA and Board Policy CE Local requires districts to prepare a budget of anticipated expenditures and revenues before June 19th and be approved by the board by June 30th. We have Ms. Adele Felix, our Assistant Superintendent for Business Operations, who will present the budget workshop for the 2023-2024 budget. Ms. Felix.
Great, thank you, Dr. Gonzalez. Tonight we have our third budget workshop for the fiscal year 2023-2024. We will begin with Mr. Josh Haney, Executive Director of Finance Services with Milk Casey, who will provide a legislative update. Welcome, Mr. Haney. Can you hear us?
Hello. Yes, I can hear you all. Thank you for having me. And sorry I couldn't be there in person. Things are definitely picking up steam here in Austin. We have a big week of committee hearings this coming up, and so I'll be giving you some up-to-date information, but the schedule is a little too crazy to allow me to travel right now. So thanks again for letting me do this remotely. So I know you guys have a hard stop at 6, so I'm going to be respectful of your time and move through this quickly. I presented much of this to your superintendent and others, school administrators at the recent Region 1 RAC meeting. CFOs have also seen similar information at the FAC meetings, but we're going to talk kind of big picture, and feel free to interrupt. Let me know if you guys have any questions or anything like that. So first off, just in these initial months of session, the real headline for us is just we knew this was going to be a busy session early on. Just given the volume of bills, everyone came ready with all their ideas this session. Particularly in the House, you can see this just shows the record level of bill filings so far this session. For the first time, we've exceeded 8,000 bills and joint resolutions filed. More ideas doesn't always mean better ideas. So there's a lot of bad ideas out there floating around that we're having conversations with those offices. But again, it's a lot like drinking from a fire hose. There is a lot of information and a lot of proposals out there this session. I do want to point out we have this resource available on our website. And through our partnership with Region 1, board members will have access to this as well. Your superintendent and folks in your business office, we've already sort of briefed them on this tool, but we take those 8,000 bills, we comb through all of them, look for anything that impacts property taxes, public education. We're at about 1,500 bills that check those boxes. We track them on our website. We update that every single day. We analyze them and sort of allow y'all to watch them move through the process. So today's presentation may not be up to date tomorrow after those committee meetings meet, but if you are interested in getting sort of ongoing information and following things in an easy way, our legislative tracker, I would recommend that tool. It has, you can slice and dice and look at all things from any angle that you'd like, and follow the specific pieces of legislation you want to keep tabs on. We make it really easy to do that. Okay, so I want to start off with some of the new faces that are on the committee. A lot of these new members have brought some new ideas, some new energy to the committee. We do have a new chair. I kind of designate him as new-ish because he was named during the interim period, but Senator Brianna Creighton was not the chair last session. So this is his first session in that seat. Some other new faces include Senator Peter Flores, Senator Phil King, Senator Morgan Lamantia, Senator Drew Springer, Tam Parker, Mays Middleton, and then Senator Donna Campbell has been on the committee before, but this is her first stint as vice chair. Mays Middleton, Tam Parker, Springer, and King all joined the Senate from the House. Senator Morgan Amatia, as y'all are aware, this is her first session. Senator Peter Flores, I think this is his second session. So some of these new faces have been in the legislature for a while, so we do have some indication of sort of where they come down on key issues. Others are new to the legislature altogether, and so we are looking to their public comments and other things to kind of see where they come down on some of those key issues. Over on the House, we have some new faces as well. We have Representative Brad Buckley. He's a former school board member in McAllen ISD. Representative Charles Cunningham is also a former school board member. We have Representative Cody Harris, Brian Harrison, Cole Hefner, Matt Schaefer as well joining the committee for the first time this session. Representative Oscar Longoria has been in the legislature for a while now, but this is his first stint on the House Public Education Committee. And then Representative Gina Hinojosa is a former school board member at Austin ISD. And then Representative Alma Allen has been on the committee for a very long time. She's even been vice chair before, but she was not vice chair the last session, so we go ahead and designate her as new to that position. So, we have a lot of good public ed advocates that are filling some empty shoes this session. It's really encouraging to see former school board members serving on this committee. They bring a very valuable perspective to the policy making that goes on here. The next question we immediately got after this committee was announced was, what does this mean for charters? Because we know the Senate is going to pass charters, not charters, vouchers, excuse me. What does this mean for vouchers? We knew the Senate was going to pass vouchers, and all eyes were kind of on the House and looking at what the make of this committee would mean for the likelihood of vouchers passing this session. So we went back and looked at their historical votes, their public comments, and just their prior history on this issue. And this is sort of where we've landed. So we see sort of three definite yes votes on vouchers given prior votes and comments and that kind of thing. But we were encouraged when this was announced because it seems to be, this committee seems to be set up in a way to make it very, very difficult for vouchers to make it out of the House Public Ed Committee. And so this was welcome news. And again, every time I present this slide, I caution the audience that this is based on their historical voting activity or their public comments. This is not necessarily a perfect indication of where they will ultimately come down on the issue, but we do feel pretty confident that House Public Ed has, it's traditionally been where voucher bills go to die, and we think that will likely be the case this session. Switching gears here to the state budget. As you can see here, things are a little bit out of whack as far as we see it. We recognize the need for property tax relief, especially given pretty dramatic valuation increases we've seen across the state. But we would like to see a little bit more balance here. The amount of property tax cuts that have been proposed vary depending on which chamber you're talking about, but in the $15 to $17 billion range. But both chambers are set on limiting themselves to a $5 billion increase for new funding for public schools. That's even more problematic because some elements of that $5 billion are not necessarily formula enhancements. So you guys, you may have heard of the commissioner's initiative to offer curriculum to public schools, free curriculum, open source curriculum, which I'm sure that many schools would appreciate those resources. But at least in the House, that's coming out of that $5 billion top line number. So that would leave, again, billions and billions of dollars of surpluses, starting at this point where there's only $5 billion for new formula increases for schools, is, just to be honest about it, it's been a little frustrating in these initial months of session. So that's sort of big picture where things stand. Budget-wise, I'll go into some differences between the House and the Senate. We have seen the initial versions of the House and Senate budgets. The House is a little bit further along than the Senate. As you can see, the Senate has, they've sort of broken out into their working groups. They have some recommendations. They're sort of on the verge of approving those recommendations over in the Senate. In the House, it's already made it out of committee. It's set to hit the floor on the 6th. So that'll be a very long night. So if you guys want to tune into that, I'm sure it'll be an entertaining watch. So yeah, things are a little bit further along in the House, and then I'll go into the differences here between the two bills. Both bills are sort of in agreement in what the investments it'll take to maintain current school finance law. They increased what are called the golden pennies. Those are the first 8 pennies above your tier 1 rate. And so they maintain the yield, the required growth in the value of those pennies. So just right off the top, before any bills passed, those pennies are going to become more valuable for your district and will now draw down more state aid. So that's good news. That cost the state about $2.4 billion, again, just to keep up with those required increases under current law. And then current law also has some requirements around tax compression, right? So if you think back to House Bill 3, all the tax compression elements that were put in place there, that totals $5.3 billion of tax compression under current law. The two chambers do differ in terms of how much additional property tax they want to give. The House has a little bit higher price tag of $12 billion. And they have different ideas on how they want to distribute that property tax relief. I'll talk about that more here in a little bit. Over in the Senate, their property tax relief package is right at just shy of $10 billion. And again, they have some different ideas on how to distribute that property tax relief. In terms of new money for public education, again, both chambers are in agreement of sort of a top line $5 billion number. But again, the way they distribute that $5 billion is different as we sit here today. So on the House, they're talking about formula increases, increasing the basic allotment, increasing the teacher incentive allotment, more school safety funding, more special ed funding. The only bill that's sort of changing the school finance system and increasing weights and calculations, that's in the House. There's not a school finance bill really over in the Senate. You can see on the right-hand side there, they have that $5 billion top line number, but they want to spend that money on vouchers. They do want to send some money for teacher pay. They do have school safety there, and then 2565 is the statewide open source instructional materials initiative. So at least in the Senate, they're not really contemplating increases to the school finance system that would then flow to the district that it could be spent at y'all's discretion. Right, they're more targeted on sort of flow-through funds that would go directly to teachers or directly to voucher recipients. And so again, just differences in the way they want to distribute that top line $5 billion increase. Some other items in the budget where the House and the Senate are in agreement: the Instructional Materials and Technology Fund that was reduced last session. And it's now back up to close to historical levels, not quite fully there, but we're encouraged by the fact that they're working to get back to those historical levels of a little bit more than $1 billion over the biennium. The Strong Foundations grant has gotten renewed for another 2 years at $150 million. The Supplemental Special Education Services Program is going to continue at just shy of $100 million. This is the funding. There was originally some concern over this as being a voucher-like program, but this can't be used on tuition, right, which is the real key to qualify as a voucher program. This allows special ed families that are in public schools to draw down $1,500 for services outside of school or equipment or other things that they may need. It's not, again, to be used for tuition or to pay for services outside of the public school system. A new item that both chambers have proposed is related to cybersecurity. Both chambers' proposal includes $55 million to a state agency called the Department of Information Resources that would help support public schools in combating cyber attacks and that kind of thing. Okay, so that was the budget that's for the next biennium. Every session, the legislature also passes what's called a supplemental appropriation. That is to sort of true up spending that occurred in the current biennium that we're still in now, and to make any sort of additional appropriations that are necessary. So you can see this bill is pretty far along. It has made it out of the Senate. The House committee has adopted a substitute version of this, and then it's also set to be heard on the House floor on the 6th. And so that'll be a long day on the House for them. But there are some differences between the two chambers with regards to public education appropriations in the supplemental bill as well. So the big ticket item I want to draw your attention to is that first one that they have in common. The House and Senate bills both they reconcile the original school finance appropriations with what we're now projected to spend on public schools. So you can see the state essentially spent $8.2 billion less than they expected during the current biennium. And that's for a number of reasons. We all know about the ESSER supplanting. And of course, we all know about the higher than expected property value growth and then the disruptions that COVID had on statewide ADA. So you put all of those pieces together, and that essentially comes out to the state coming in $8.2 billion under budget. And so this bill sort of lowers that appropriation for the current biennium to be in line with what the state thinks public education is going to cost over this 2-year period. There are some additional appropriations that are in this bill. The sort of big ticket item is the TRS benefit enhancements. And there are some differences between the two chambers here. The House wants to spend $3.5 billion on its TRS benefit enhancements, and the Senate has a top line number of $1 billion there. Both of their proposals include a COLA for retirees. The House includes sort of an automatic COLA going forward if certain performance thresholds are met. So I think if the TRS fund hits certain performance year-over-year growth, then a COLA would automatically go to retirees into that. Both chambers also have a sort of 13th check for certain retirees as well. So there are some similarities once you look at the specific proposals, but you can see that the House is a little bit bigger of a package that they're proposing. School safety, there are some differences there, both in the dollar amount and the sort of the funding source for those. The House wants to spend $1.6 billion in GR to help schools meet those facility safety requirements that TA has put out. The Senate had originally spent $600 million from federal funds to do the same thing, essentially, to provide more funding for schools to help meet those facility safety requirements that TEA has put out. All right, and so I'll next move on to the sort of focusing in on those property tax proposals and sort of differences between the two chambers. These, the property tax pieces of legislation are probably where the legislature has made the most progress so far. So we're starting to see the differences between the two chambers' proposals in a little bit more detail. I'll start with Senate Bill 3 by Senator Bencourt. This bill increases the homestead exemption from $40,000 to $70,000. You guys will recall we just had an increase from $25,000 to $40,000. This takes that up again. It also provides an increase to the over 65 and disabled state mandated exemption from $10,000 to $30,000. I do want to point out that when we think about the impact on school district budgets, traditionally these types of homestead exemption increases have been paired with hold harmlesses. That is the case for Senate Bill 3. It includes a hold harmless on both the M&O side and the INS side. As you're losing value, that could come with less funding for your district, but these hold harmlesses are there to sort of backstop that and keep y'all from having a hit to your budget. And so one thing I do want to point out about those hold harmlesses is that they're not 100%. You can see here, this sort of goes back all the way to the late 90s when they first increased the hold harmless to $15K. They're not providing coverage on the M&O side up to $25,000. On the INS side, they're not providing coverage up to $15,000. And then they only cover bonds that were passed after, were eligible for state aid before a certain time. And so again, while a hold harmless is good, we'd like it to see it cover bonds, going into the future, because if the hold harmless continues to be structured this way, all future bonds are going to become more expensive. And so that's a worry that we have if they do increase that homestead exemption up again. I'm going to move through these next couple slides pretty quickly to keep us on track. Senate Bill 4 lowers the tax compression floor from 90% to 80%, and then it provides uniform tax compression for everybody of 7 pennies. And that would cost the state about $5.4 billion. Senate Bill 5 increases the business personal property exemption from $2,500 to $25,000. This is essentially the business property owners around the state saw all the resident homestead owners getting, that homestead exemption increase go up, and the business property owners were wondering where their exemption was and where their increase was. And so Senate Bill 5 is throwing them a bone, helping provide property tax relief to business personal property owners. And that would cost the state around $200 million. Switching over to the House, they have really just one main property tax relief bill, House Bill 2. That provides an additional 15 cents of Tier 1 rate tax compression, and that would apply to all districts uniformly. It doesn't change that 90% compression floor, but one big difference is it does reduce the appraisal growth limit from 10% down to 5%. Currently, there's a growth limit for resident homesteads where their appraised value can't grow by more than 10% each year. So this lowers that to 5% and applies it to all real property. And so that includes business property, that includes multifamily property, that includes homesteads that maybe folks are renting out or that kind of thing. And so that would have pretty significant impacts on obviously your values that you can tax on, at least on the INS side, because the normal rules of school finance are if you lose value on the M&O side, you get more state aid to offset that. On the INS side, it's a little more complicated. Many districts don't receive INS state aid, and there's just the yields on the INS side are such that it doesn't fully cover you if you're losing value. The other thing that is problematic about House Bill 2 is just that it will create this sort of strange situation where the appraised value of your home is going to be dependent on when it was sold, or I'm sorry, value of any property, any real property will be dependent on when it was sold. So you can kind of see that highlighted here on this chart. These two properties here have the same appraised value. They're subject to that 5% cap. And then in tax year 26, that orange property with the new owner is sold. That's going to reset the clock on that appraisal growth limit. And so those two properties would be appraised at different values, even though they have the same market value. The only difference being when the property was sold. And so just to be clear, this kind of situation is possible under the current appraisal cap, but lowering it to 5% and expanding it to apply to many more types of properties will make this kind of situation much more common. And we've seen it cause some headaches in other states like Florida and California that have adopted these kind of these appraisal growth caps. A bill that is going to be heard tomorrow in the House Public Ed Committee. And this is really the only piece of legislation that's looking at making increases to the school finance system. You can see the top line numbers there. Initial runs show that this bill will increase state spending by around $1.7 billion in fiscal 24 and $2.3 billion in fiscal 25. I'll go through very quickly sort of the main points on here on this bill and sort of how that'll impact y'all's district. I think one good thing is that it increases the basic allotment to $6,300 and includes an inflation adjustment. This is something we work with Representative King on to get that in the bill. So we're encouraged by that. It also makes changes to the required compensation increases that you have to give. When House Bill 3 passed, that was 30%. This bumps that up to 50% and changes some of the ways that districts can come into compliance with that requirement. So that's something that we're monitoring and working with Representative King's office on. And we'll see kind of where that lands at the end of session. We're also encouraged that a lot of the allotments are moving over to being enrollment-based, which is good because then if you guys have attendance disruptions at some point during the year, you don't lose funding on those allotments. And so that would include career and technical education, bilingual, early ed. So that's a welcome development. Pretty significant increases in transportation allotment. And then some other new allotments related to advanced mathematic pathways, those are all welcome developments. Increases in comp ed funding, some increases in the minimum salary schedule. This would largely impact sort of smaller rural districts, and there's a whole harmless allotment provided there. I'm going to sort of skip over some of these safety bills just in the interest of time. But there is a lot of discussion on how to better support schools and both in more funding, but also with that comes more requirements, right? So you can see that sort of outlined here in House Bill 3. There's a requirement to have an armed school security officer at each school during regular hours, and it does come with a little bit more funding. This one's not quite as generous as some other bills. For example, Senate Bill 11 does something similar. It requires put some requirements on service centers to help support LEAs. It does have a small increase in the school safety funding. But House Bill 13 is the more significant increase in school safety funding. It brings that it's a tenfold increase in the school safety allotment. And it does include some funding for school guardians, an annual stipend up to $25,000. So with that, I will pause for any questions, and if you guys, I want to get you guys out right at 6 o'clock, so let me know if there's anything else. I can put my contact info in the chat, and you guys are welcome to reach out at any time.
Any questions for Mr. Haney? Thank you. Josh,
Yeah.
Some of the that one bill you mentioned has the enrollment average in it, but some of the other bills continue to have ADA. So how's this going to reconcile if some bills that are coming after the bill is going to be voted on this week have ADA versus enrollment?
Well, sometimes when that happens, they just, there are just sort of conflicting elements in statute, which is always interesting. But with something like that, where it's sort of fundamental to the school finance calculations, they would probably address that in what's called conference committee. And so that's, the House passes its version of the bill, the Senate passes their version. They're not identical, so a select group of House members, a select group of Senate members sort of come together, they meet behind closed doors, and then they come out with sort of the reconciled differences between the two bills. And so I would imagine something like that, where there's two different bills that pass that funded an allotment with ADA and one funds it with enrollment. They would likely reconcile that during conference committee, and if not, I guess it would just be up to TEA lawyers to try and figure out how to reconcile that. But I don't believe that's been the case before. Usually they clean up that kind of stuff before the end of session. Yeah, so I wouldn't worry too much about sort of conflicts. And you see one bill that funds an allotment this way and another bill that funds it that way. As it moves through the process, one bill will kind of consume the other, and then that will be the vehicle for school finance going forward.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions for Mr. Haney? Josh, any information on this bill that was filed by Representative Guerrero about the bipartisan floor amendment for HB 1?
Regarding regarding vouchers?
It would prohibit the use of state funds for vouchers?
Yeah, so that's interesting. So that the House has taken that vote, at least every session going back the past, at least as far as I've been following it, the past 4 or 5 sessions. And usually it passes, overwhelmingly. I think last year it passed 115 to 30 or something like that. And so I've heard that that amendment has over 100 supporters right now. It will be interesting to see how that vote total compares with prior sessions. Again, as I mentioned, it was 115 yes votes for that last session. I would imagine it would be a little bit less than that, given all the pressure that the governor and lieutenant governor are putting on folks to vote for vouchers. But again, the rumor I heard today was it's got 100 yes votes, so it doesn't sound like support has dwindled too much there. I do want to also point out that vouchers have hit a bit of a stumbling block in the Senate. They sailed out of Senate committee, and pretty quickly. But I've heard that there's at least 4 holdouts, including Senator Hinojosa, who's being subjected to some pretty intense pressure from the Lieutenant Governor's office, that's my understanding. And so, to the extent folks around the state can send him supportive messages and encourage him to hold the line and stick, continue his opposition to vouchers, I think that would, we may be able to stop vouchers in their tracks over in the Senate, which would be, pretty surprising, considering the success that voucher advocates have had in that chamber historically.
All right, Mr. Haney, we thank you for your time, sir, and look forward to another report soon.
Yeah, no problem. Thanks for having me. Y'all take care.
Thank you so much. Josh Haney, Moak, and Casey. Now we move on to the HR part, and we welcome Mr. Todd Miller.
Thank you. I will try to go quick. I've only got 11 slides. I've got some key points I want to talk about, and if you have any questions, I'll come back to those slides. So tonight I'm going to present information on the compensation plan strategy, average starting teacher salary in Texas by region, average teacher salary in Texas, history of salary increases, teacher market comparison salary increases if we keep our current salary schedules, Salary increases if we go with the revised TASB schedules, the teacher librarian base salary range, and of course TEA minimum teacher salary. And tonight I'm joined by Mr. Stan Crown, Sandra Gomez, and Andy Silver if we have any questions. So compensation, there we go. Compensation plan strategy. What is compensation? It's your base salary, it's your stipend, it's your extra duty, what we pay, employer pays for health, dental, prescription drugs, life insurance, TRS contributions, and EAP. Employees' true compensation also includes the contribution MISD pays for their full-time employees, which medical, dental. You'll see on the far right-hand side, $5,814 per employee annually for medical and dental. And TRS is $1,290 all total, $7,104 per employee annually. Just want to do a quick update on compensation statements that we continue to work towards. Administration continues its effort towards reducing compensation statements for our employees. And Andy's been working real hard with our Department of Technology. Current challenge is how do we validate the information to make sure it's 100% accurate? So there's so many moving parts in that, to include promotions, transfers, and reassignments, so he continues to work that. Compensation plan strategy also includes focusing on developing our employees, using professional development and advancement opportunities to recruit and retain our employees. Ongoing succession planning activities has resulted in numerous internal promotions. This district must, and at least administration strongly encourage, district must continue to ensure compensation levels provide incentive for employees to seek promotional opportunities. For example, we need to provide those incentives for our teachers to go from teachers to assistant principals, and the principals and the principals into associate or assistant superintendents to continue that pipeline. Starting pay matters, but it's not everything. Data shows that we do not have trouble, recruiting or retaining teachers. Our teacher turnover rate starting in 2021 was 10.6. 21-22 we saw a 13.6 increase post-COVID, and we're down to 4.95 year-to-date. New hire surveys, it continues to be the top 2 reasons people come to McAllen is location and advancement opportunities and former students. Exit survey, the top 2 reasons for people leaving is personal, family, and career change. Starting teacher, and I'll go through these kind of quickly. Starting teacher salary, you'll see here that Region 1, is 6th in the state. McAllen slightly above that at $52,150, $950 above Region 1. You look at Houston, and the ones above us, Houston, El Paso, Richardson, Fort Worth, San Antonio. Salary.com tells me that Houston's 20.5% higher cost of living, El Paso 10.3, Richardson 27.2, Fort Worth 26.7, and San Antonio 16.7 higher to live. So we definitely got a great deal living down here in the valley. I really like this one. Average teacher salary, Region 1, dropped last year. They was 4th. Unfortunately, we've dropped down to 8th as a region. But McAllen, you'll see, is at the very top. It's the 3rd top position as far as average teacher salary. So I think that's excellent. And keep in mind, this is a region. So I'm going to get into a chart here in a little bit that talks about our local market. History of salary increases. The chart shows the history of salary increases since 2009-10. This chart shows all district employees have received a salary increase every year except for 9 and 10. So that was a $1,000 increase only for teachers, librarians, counselors, nurses, and speech pathologists. 11-12, no increases, $4 billion cut by Texas legislature. 2021, no increases due to limited funds availability, but we was able to fund a $300 December stipend. 18-19 salary increases are related to the TRE. 19-20 salary increases related to House Bill 3. So if you notice in the bottom right-hand corner here, you'll see 2021, that $300 stipend in December. It's kind of a summary. 21-22, $5,000, $3,000 in December, and $2,000 in March. And then $1,500 in December for 22-23. Teacher market comparison. This slide tells us a lot. If you all can see that okay. Let's compare McAllen ISD against 11 other districts, 21-22. Last year we only had 10 districts participating. So we're kind of starting to see that a little bit. Some local districts are not participating in TASB salary surveys, so TASB kind of goes out and finds the data in another way. The district remains focused on being as competitive as possible given budgetary constraints. And despite losing ground in the local market, McAllen ISD still has an average teacher salary that is 99% compared to the local market median. So as you look at this chart, I'm going to look at the 0 year, if I may. 0, 5, 10, 15, 20, and then the average. And I'll come back to this column right here. So 0 this year, 22-23, we're at starting teacher salary at $52,150. That puts us in number 10. Unfortunately, market out of 11 districts, 97% compared to market. Last year, we was number 8 at 98%. 5-year salary is at $54,310, number 9, 97 compared to market. Last year, we was number 8. 10-year salary is at $57,580, number 8. 99% compared to market median. Last year we was at 95% compared to market median, so we jumped 4% in market median competitiveness. 15-year salary or $60,000, number 9. Last year we was 7, 99% compared to market median, we jumped 3%. 20-year salary, we're at 62,930, it's number 9, 99% compared to market. Our average salary is 59,245, number 7 for this market. The last one was the region, and that's 99% compared to market. If you look at the maximum years credit over here, you'll see a lot of 25-year districts. We cap ours at 20. That's for new teachers coming into the district. Administration recommending we raise that to 25 next year, for next year going forward. This particular year, I believe we've only had 2 teachers come into the district, new to the district this year. So to apply, it would cost us $3,450 per teacher, so about $6,800 roughly this year. But I think it's going to help our recruiting and retention, because last year that was a major issue. It was, why are we capped at 20 when these other people are capped at 25? So it's just a recommendation from the administration. Salary increases. This chart shows us, let me start off with saying we are not making any recommendations or proposals tonight. I need to make that very clear, please. We just want to show you the cost of these 3 scenarios. This chart shows the cost and dollar amount of raises for teachers and librarians and cost of increases for all other employees. Fringes are figured at 12%. That's Medicare, health, dental, TRS, etc. The positive of doing this one is it's less budget impact compared to the next slide, which is salary increases, revised TASB schedules. The negative, because everything has a positive, has a negative. The negative is not adjusting our salary schedules to keep pace with the market. Further reduces our market competitiveness, excuse me. And the salary schedule were not adjusted in 10, 11, 15, 16, 17, 18, 18, 19. So collectively, that's helped us, unfortunately, to go down from, when I got here, it was like 5 or 6, and we're down to, you've seen the 9 and 10 numbers. Another bad part is it's very costly to play catch up financially to close those gaps. This next one, salary increase for TASB recommended salary schedules. Again, we're not making any recommendations or proposals either way. Just want to show you the cost of these options. This chart shows the cost and dollar amount of raises for teachers, librarians, and cost of increase for all other employees. The positive, it helps to keep the district more competitive to the local market. And the negative is increased budget impact compared to salary increases by staying current. Teacher, librarian base salary. So the way to read this chart is look at the top section, and then the other ones are just the scenario 1%, 1.5%, or 2%. So the top under the current is 10 months or 187 days. So a new year, 0-year teacher is getting paid $52,150, and the maximum cap, I'll come back to that, is $62,930. These are new teachers to the district when I say cap. So if you come in, if you come in with 22 years, for example, you will be capped at 20 years. However, you continue there every year thereafter to get the normal teacher increase that is approved by the board. So I know that's been confusing at times. So all current teachers beyond 20 years receive the same salary, same pay raise that all teachers receive. The current placement maximum shows a pay range for our current employees. So we start out at $52,150, and we have a 49-year teacher that's earning $84,602. I know we got one down around at 50 year. This year will be 50 years, so that will be updated at the end of the school year. And of course, the same information is shown for the 1%, the 1.5, and the 2%. I like this chart. This is the TEA minimum teacher salary. So the TEA minimum is $33,600 for a 0-year teacher, and $54,540 for a 20-year teator. As I looked at the regions around the state, I don't know if you happen to catch it on that, you've got the papers. If you look at Abilene and some of those districts up in north central Texas, they're at $34,000, $35,000 starting salary for the teacher. So excuse me, that's why the state has to have such a wide range between minimum and the 20-year teacher. Excuse me. If you look at McAllen, minimum is $52,150, and these are for current teachers, and that's $62,930 for those teachers there. Excuse me. And I know I've flown through this quite quickly. So, is there any questions?
Any questions from board staff?
Yeah, thank you, President. You mentioned going to 25 years on the top end instead of 20 years. What would that look like?
So if we bumped our cap, that's what you're referring to, I believe. If you bumped the cap from 20 to 25, don't quote me on the exact number, but it'd probably be about $66,000 and some change for a 25-year teacher as compared to, so I gotta make sure I get to the right number.
Right now it's 63, isn't it? 62, 930.
66,380.
At 25.
63,
66,380
got it. And right now it's 62, 930.
at 20.
20.
So yes. It's just the right thing to do. If you look at some of these things right there, they're in 25. In Brownsville, I believe, is at 30. With bigger part in 35. Just a recommendation from the administration.
And you're not suggesting, you're showing us an example of teachers in Liberia's base salary range at a 2%. You would include that in the 2% of 1,200 increase for the minimum as well. You would adjust the minimum. You would include it in the minimum. Is that correct?
Which chart are you looking at?
I'm looking on page 10 of your presentation, and it talks, item number 3. Because I want to be clear, because I think early on I might have confused myself. I was getting the impression that you weren't really talking about any increase on the base salary or the starting salary for a 0-year teacher. But in reality, the chart does say that if we went to 2%, you would include it at the minimum.
Yes, so at 2%, if I may answer your question, I believe I got the question is, at 2%, a 0-year teacher would jump up to $53,500.
So you would make if we were to go that route, you are talking about an adjustment even for the 0-year
Yes, sir.
teacher. Got it. And what's the possibility, and maybe Josh, I didn't want to ask Josh this question, it's really way too early, but as we saw in a previous year, we had to come back as a board and make some changes because the legislature came in late. So is that likelihood to occur this time, or do we anticipate that possibility that we may have to come back like we did in 19 and 20 and in August have to make some adjustments?
That would be my thoughts, just like House Bill 3 in 1920, how we said, but we have to do it in the May-June board meeting that, I forget how we worded it, Adele, but.
Contingent upon funding.
There you go.
Still on if you want to talk to Josh.
It'd be contingent upon funding. We did do it for HB3.
So that would be the key, is that if we move, as we move to June and make our plans, we could put that language in it just in the event that the legislature hasn't finalized the school finance. Okay, gotcha. Go ahead. Well, I don't know if to bring John, I really don't want to bring him back in, but you know, right now the HB3 was at 30%, and there's a bill that's talking about 50%. So are we talking about these adjustments here aside from any school finance bill that may come out that says you have to be at a different percentage?
Well, because if they increase the allotment, we were required, and according to the new bill that now came out from 30 to 50, we'll readjust these scales to reflect the 50% requirement. So it wouldn't be in addition to, it would be up to the 50 at least, so we can write that.
Okay. So right now, your thoughts are, and that's what they are, thoughts, and looking at the TASB salary schedule and looking at the current salary schedule. By the way, I like the TASB salary schedule, just my thought. And I think we definitely need to increase the mid and the max, those in the middle, like 15 to 20, and obviously those that are 25 plus, to decompress. And it looks like the salary increase of the TASB kind of does that, right? It kind of decompresses it somewhat, or would.
If that's the intention of the equity adjustment, bless you.
Bless you. All right. Okay. All right. So all of this is based on what we think is going to be where our budget's going to fall in, aside from the current bills that are in there with.
Not necessarily. So this is just showing us the cost of what these scenarios would cost us. But we right now are not committing because, one, we need to see where they land on the property values, where a preliminary comes in May, and then after the result of any basic allotment adjustments. So at that point, and we're hoping when we get all our data, it'd be at the next budget workshop, that we'll be able to predict our revenue streams.
Okay. Fair enough. Thank you. Thank you, Ms. President.
Trustee Aliceda.
I just get nervous when we put things in there saying contingent on, because we could say like, we're gonna give an 8% raise, but contingent on, or we could go really low and say, well, we're gonna give a 1% raise. I hate how we have to do our budget before everybody else, and all the other districts kind of look at us, and then they're like, oh, well, they did this, let's do this plus $1 type thing. And I hate, it kind of feels like I was talking about earlier, it feels like we're like a credit card, we're like buying stuff ahead of time without the money. You know what I mean?
Well, if they do provide us with a basic allotment, we have to be committed, and if it, at least right now, it's at 30%. If this bill does pass, we'd have to do the 50. So it would be contingent upon the basic allotment increase, and then that's what we would base our raise on. So we could, like how we did similar for HB3, we brought different scenarios. If they keep the 30, this is what we would estimate would be our raise. If they do take the House bill at 100 and we do 50%, then this would be the raise. So it wouldn't be like an in-between, it'd be more of we're setting it, but upon the basic allotment increase.
So which one of these scenarios is the 30%?
Well, not yet, because we need to find out what the House is going to do, if they're going to increase it at all.
Right,
Because right now, if they don't change the allotment, there's no requirement to change.
right. That's why I'm saying it's hard to,
Yes, it's very hard.
yeah, yeah. Also, on the 20-year, going to 25 years, that's new to district.
Correct.
Just want to make that clear.
The 20 to 25, yes, exactly, new to district only.
Were we the only ones that were at 20? We were, right?
There was one or two others. Sorry, one.
Of the larger ones, though, we are.
La Jolla was
So La
20.
Jolla's on there, and,
Yeah.
I'm sorry, Mercedes.
Yeah, no, I like that. And I like what Trustee Salvador was saying about going with the TASB salary schedules, but just that alone, that's a difference of $2 million, just to get us, and that's not,
It's
it
bold.
needs to be done. We've been kicking that can down, it's something that needs to be done.
So we did do the adjustments, I believe, last year, correct? We did take in the adjustments.
Yes.
So when the salary schedules increased, not only did we do the 1,700, any individual who was identified as needing to be compressed, we provided the additional adjustments. So we've been staying with it, but yes, there is a downfall keeping our current scales, but it's a costly.
Yeah.
So if I may, along with those adjustments, for the teachers, 21 plus years have been higher. So some of those teachers, depending on the year, so they got an average of a $300 equity adjustment. So it's typically not done. It was done last year. There was a big cost to that, but it was long overdue and needed an average of $300 equity adjustments. Any other questions?
Trustee Swanee.
So two things, if we look at that HB 100 where they would give us 6,300 versus 6,160, that's a $4.8 million swing, in which 50% of that would have to go to salaries, am I correct? Okay.
Right, there's other calculations in the background?
Right.
Yes, ideally, yes.
So then also if we look at, and I know when we went to Austin, some of the phone calls that I know a lot of us have made, talk about there is a lot of momentum for funding based on enrollment versus ADA. That's like a $13 million swing. So my question is, let's say hypothetically, if we get that swing, that 13 million, does that mean
6.5.
Well, yeah, 6.5, if it's 50%, if it's 30%, but that's still a huge swing that we could adjust salaries. I mean, they might go beyond the 2%.
Oh, yes.
Look at that, it
If
will.
that's it. And we would, of course, quantify it as.
I do want to caution too, I know there's certain districts up there that rank higher than us. And also, it's not adjusting the fact that they're having to lay off 200 or 300 people because they're over budget. So that's kind of misleading. Thank you.
Any other questions?
Just a follow-up question.
Trustee Saldívar.
Thank you. There's, one of the bills is talking about an adjustment of the teacher incentive allotment, being that we're in the first phase early on. Is that likelihood that that bill passes and we're going to have to recalculate, or that's something we don't know at this point?
We don't know at this point.
We would have to
will-
recalculate if it shifts.
But we don't know because we don't know how much of an impact based on how we did our criterias in setting up the allotment.
Correct, so I think right now, correct if I'm wrong, but we are setting up our plan to submit for it to get approved. The value and the amount will be discussed after.
Gotcha.
It's given.
Right.
That is just an allotment,
Right. And it's separate about it.
separate.
Trustee Suarez.
I have one more question. I know, and this is just had to do with the presentation. If there is money allotted to, sorry, Chief, but to the police department, and this new bill has new funds for that, does that mean that the funding that we have in place now would go to our general, back to our general fund?
So what we do is we identify the needs, and so we do work hand in hand. If we get new grants, if we adjust,
So
right?
let's talk
However, where
about-
it's going to overtime because
So
we're
let-
providing.
Let's talk specifically about funding the police officers at every campus.
Mhm.
If that is new funding for the campuses that we have now, does that mean that the money that we have allotted for that can come back to our funding?
It depends. One thing that comes to mind right now is the fencing requirements.
Mhm.
Right, so fencing requirements are going to be costly, so they would probably shift into that arena.
Okay.
And
The way I read,
bill.
the way I read the bill, it's more for those schools that do not
not have
have.
police,
Exactly.
yeah.
And since we've already allocated those funds, it doesn't really,
We might miss out.
yeah.
Well, there'll be some funding, but it's not.
It's not gonna be dollar for
it's not
dollar. And
We
state,
have-
because state funding's never dollar for dollar. We had that
Correct.
conversation, so. yeah.
And we do try to identify any expense that we could go back and request reimbursement for to help us. So we track that very closely.
Okay, board, any further questions? We have a 6:30 meeting in the auditorium with all of our great accomplishments. Look forward to seeing you there. Can I get a motion to adjourn the workshop at 6:26? Motion and a second. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. The ayes carry it 5-0.
Gracias.